on a test. So if I was putting in 2 periods, I could go frontwards or backwards. So my next, again, you don't have to label all your points. If you wanted to label them, my next point would be 5 pi over 2, 3 pi, negative pi over 2, negative pi. There's 2 periods. Because I did an extra half a period here and an extra half a period here, so that's 2 full periods. But again, just to make notes a little bit quicker, I'm just going to do 1 period on most of these. Okay, on this one, I have a negative 2 in front. So what's that going to do? Okay, so every place where it would normally be 1, now it's going to be negative 2. So here, just to... This is what my base function would look like. Let me do that in red. So every place where it's at 1, I would now have a negative 2. 0 is not affected. Negative 1 would turn into positive 2. So there would be 1 period of my cosine function. Okay, this next one, I'm going to do it the legitimate way, then I'm going to show you how to cheat. Because I like cheating. I mean, not like, you know, you get a 0 on your test cheating. What? Oh, well, I didn't check them. My proctor did, so. Hers. Close enough. You're gonna go tell her you're close enough to a man. So you're gonna sit there and tell John he's close enough to a girl.
Yes. Well.
Okay, let's work on the period. No, it's fine. Anytime there's a mistake, just show them to me. I'll correct them. It's fine. It happens. All right, so let's do this the legitimate way. So put down your marks that you would normally put down. Okay, so let's calculate our new period. Let me put in, I want to go ahead and put in my graph the way it should look too. Because it helps you see what's happening whenever we do things to the period. Okay, so there's what sine should look like. All right, so now I'm going to mess with the period. So new period. Okay, so to find the new period, I take 2 pi divided by b, which is 2. So my new period is pi. That means that this entire graph that I just drew has to fit in between 0 and pi. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to take pi and divide it by 4. So I take pi divided by 4, and that's my new marks. So that means I need to count by pi over 4. Okay, so I have a mark at pi over 4 and a mark at 3 pi over 4 now. I take my new period, I take p, and I divide it by 4. That's defined because normally I have 4 marks, correct? Well, I need 4 marks to use to graph with. So I need to take my new period and divide it by 4. That's how these marks are created. If you take 2 pi and divide it by 4, you get pi over 2. What? Ask for what? I have to find my new period because of this number here. You take 2 pi divided by that to find your new period. Once you have a new period, then you have to find your new marks to graph with. To find your new marks to graph with, you take your period divided by 4. Then you follow your pattern for your graphing. So my pattern for graphing sine is I start at 0, then I go up to 1, then I go back down to 0, then I go to -1, then I go back up to 0. You can't really use your unit circle anymore because you changed your period. You have to use your pattern for sine. So the pattern for sine is 0, 1, 0, -1, 0. So I follow that pattern. Then I graph that. So by changing the period, that's what it did to my graph. It shrunk it down. So the period either shrinks my graph or stretches it out. So if I would have had a fraction in there, it would have stretched my graph out. If I would have put a 1/2 in there, it would have doubled the length of my graph. If I put a 2 in there, it shrinks it down. Makes it half as long. Yeah. Yes, that's where that 2 came from. Okay, so let's do another one of these. Okay, and this time I'll show you how to cheat. Because on this one, doing it that way is going to be very, very difficult. So, and let me show you why. Let's find our period before we make any marks. So if I take 2 pi divided by pi over 2, that's going to equal 4. How does that match up with my 2 pi's and my pi's and everything? It doesn't. No, on my graph. I have my tick marks lined up with pi's. Is 4 going to fit nicely with that? Not at all. That's why we cheat. What we do is I'm going to do this. Before I label my marks at all, I'm going to graph. Let's see. Cosine looks like this. 1, -1. Cosine goes like that. I could have done that without ever figuring out anything, without even looking at my period, correct? Okay, after I graph it, now I'm going to put in my labels. Well, I know my period is 4. If I divide my period by 4, what am I counting by? 1. So this is 1, 2, 3. There I go. The reason why it's cheating is it doesn't show you how your graph is shrinking or stretching, because your graph always looks the same. So you have to realize that your graph is shrinking or stretching. But it makes it a hell of a lot easier to graph. Because then you don't have to worry about, oh shoot, where does 4 go in comparison to 2 pi? Is that smaller or bigger than 2 pi? Is that smaller or bigger than 3 pi over 2? You don't have to worry about any of that. We cheated. Okay, I know 10-minute bell rang. I told you I didn't want to go the entire class time. I lied to myself and to all of you. Let's do one more. Just one more.
I'm at that, like, I don't know why I'm tired right now, but I went to bed, like, really early last night, but I'm tired right now, and I'm kind of, like, delusional.
But we'll cheat with it, I promise. We just have to be a little bit careful how we cheat. Okay, I'm not going to put any labels on it. Okay, but I know sine starts at 0, but I'm looking at these negatives. These negatives are going to change things. First of all, it's going to go down. Also, because of the negative on the inside, it's going to go backwards. So this negative out here makes it go down. This negative in here makes it go backwards. So instead of making those tick marks out there, I'm going to make these tick marks back here. Okay, so let's draw our sine now going backwards. So sine normally goes up, but because of this negative out here, I'm going to go backwards, right? Okay. Now, since my amplitude is 1/2, what should I label my marks on my y-axis? 1/2. See, I can cheat in that direction too. Okay, my period.
So the first number is the amplitude?
Yep. My period is 2 pi divided by 1/6. So what's my period? 12 pi. You can ignore the negative. We already took care of the negative because we made it go backwards. So that means that this number here is negative 12 pi. So if I split that into fourths, what am I counting by? 3 pi. So this is going to be negative 3 pi.
That's all I can do.
Yep.
That's all I got.
So there we go. Now, look, I think this is cool. Look what those negatives did. If I go in the front direction, my graph looks normal. Do you know why? Remember when we talked about even or odd functions? Is sine even or odd? It's odd, which means that sine of a negative number is equal to negative sine of the same number, which means those negatives would cancel out. So the graph of this is the exact same as the graph of this. But that negative on the inside, since sine is an odd function, I can move it to the outside so it would cancel out. So those negatives could disappear. I don't know. I just thought it was a cool thing that you might think about whenever you're graphing these, that you can move those negatives around. So if you don't like dealing with the negative on the inside, you can move it to the outside. If you have a cosine, what could you do with the negative on the inside? No, totally ignore it. Because cosine is an even function. So negatives on the inside don't matter at all.